Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with TB Fork, and this is day 9 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be elk ribeye steak, and today is going to be a shoulders and arms training workout. And the theme for today's video is exercise frequency. So today, I'm going to be explaining how many days per week you should be training based off of various factors. Now let's get started. And while we're resting, let's continue on with our discussion of training frequency. The other factor that we need to consider is going to be the workout intensity. The higher the intensity of the workout, the more rest is going to be required because you're going to need a lot more time to recover. There is, again, a direct relationship between intensity and recovery time, not only with the intraset, but also with the general program. So if you're doing high intensity, you're going to need longer rest periods between sets and also longer rest periods between workouts. Low intensity activities, on the other hand, they can be done more frequently because there is an inverse relationship between intensity and the frequency at which you are training. If something is very, very low intense, then you could go high with regard to the frequency of which you are training. The other thing that you want to take a look at is going to be the volume. Intensity and volume, they need to be balanced for optimal progress. If you have really, really high intensity, really, really high volume, that's going to be a recipe for you to burn out. So you would want to make sure that you balance out the level of intensity with the level of volume that you're performing. High intensity sessions, they should be limited to 3 to 4 per week. If you were doing low intensity, high volume, you could do that 4 to 7 days per week. But you want to make sure that you are getting adequate rest and recovery so that you're able to recover in time for each of the subsequent workouts. With regard to lower intensity workouts, things like walking, like cardio, these can be done every single day because they're very low impact and they're not really going to take a whole ton of issues with regard to straining the joints. If you are overdoing high intensity sessions, this can lead to burnout or injury. But with low intensity, you have pretty much a free for all to do it as often as you would like. You also want to make sure that you are doing proper recovery when you are performing it. If you want to see how you are recovering, you can check your morning heart rate. One thing that I do with my athletes is I will have them measure their heart rate first thing in the morning. And if their heart rate is elevated by 5%, on that day, we will cut the training volume. If it is elevated by 10% or more, then on those days, what we would do is we would end up doing an active recovery day. So depending on what your resting heart rate is first thing in the morning, that would be a good indicator of how recovered you are. And should you decrease the volume or should you just take an active recovery day? Another thing that you would want to consider is your heart rate variability. With regard to heart rate variability, this is going to be the fluctuations between the heartbeats, and this is going to differ between the ages. Generally, you're going to have greater heart rate variability when you are younger, and as you get older, you're going to have less of a heart rate variability. But those are just a few things, and when we get back during the next rest period, we will continue on. But for right now, set number 5. And while we're resting, let's continue our discussion on training frequency. Another factor that we must consider is going to be the size of the muscle group that we are training. If you are training larger muscle groups, those are going to require more recovery time. So if you are doing something like your lat training, chest training, that's going to take longer to recover than if you are doing arms. If you're doing biceps and triceps, that you could get away with a lot more training sessions per week. For something like your back, your chest, your legs, you're only going to be able really to do 1 or 2 hard training sessions per week because of the size of the muscle mass. Whereas if you're doing smaller muscle groups like your arms or your calves, those are going to be able to recover a lot faster. So you'll be able to get away with anywhere from 2 to 3 training sessions per week for those muscle groups. Also, when training large muscles, if you're doing it very, very frequently, it can increase the risk of overtraining. So you would want to make sure that you are properly recovered before you get into the next hard training session for those large muscle groups. Also, we have to take a look at compound movements versus isolation movements. Compound movements, as with the larger muscles, they are going to involve more muscles and it is going to require more rest. Whereas isolation, you're only working on small muscles and fewer numbers of muscle at the same time. So the frequency, you can get away with a little bit more frequency if you are doing more isolation exercises. And then with regard to something like your leg training, your back training, typically, again, 1 to 2 hard times per week is all you're going to really be able to manage. If you're a beginner, you may be able to get away with a little bit more because you're not going to be able to push yourself hard. But if you're somebody who's advanced, 1 hard training session could absolutely ruin you for a week, and you may only be able to do 1 hard training session. The other thing with regard to the actual, what we just discussed, is going to be making sure that you have proper recovery measures in place. With regard to proper recovery, this is going to ensure that your large muscle groups grow and they avoid injury. If you are not recovered properly and you go right into a workout, greater likelihood that you're going to end up pulling a muscle, you're going to end up sacrificing your form because you're going to be too tired, and all of these things can lead to injury. One thing though is by combining large and small muscle groups at the same time, this will allow for a little bit more of efficient recovery. So what you could do is as your primary exercises, work on those big superficial muscles with the compound movements. And then for your assistance exercises or your supplemental work, then you could move on to the more isolation and smaller muscle groups. But rest is up. Time for the sixth and final set. And while we're resting, let's discuss biomotor abilities and training frequency. With regard to biomotor abilities, there are 8 that are required for athletic performance. Those are going to be speed, strength, power, endurance, flexibility, agility, coordination, and balance. Speed training, that is going to require high recovery time due to the nervous system fatigue. If you are doing very, very intense exercise at maximum effort, you're not going to be able to recover in short periods of time. So if you are training for speed, you're going to need to space out your workouts a little bit more. Same thing with strength workouts. Strength workouts, typically you're going to do anywhere from 3 to 4 times per week because when you do strength training, you're training at a higher intensity. A couple of examples of 3 and 4 day programs would be the Strong Lifts 5x5 and the conjugate method that was developed by Louis Simmons. The 5x5, it's 3 exercises. You basically are doing a bench press, a row, and a squat, and then you are doing an overhead press, a pull-up, and a deadlift on your day 2, and you would do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday type thing, whereas I already mentioned with the conjugate method, it is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So you're doing 2 max effort days and then 2 dynamic effort days. With regard to power training, these needs are going to alternate days with regard to your recovery. You are going to want to have intense days, and then you're going to want to have technique days where you're focusing solely on technique. That way, you'll still be able to get a training session in, but you're going to be able to recover for the next intense session. And with regard to endurance training, this can be performed a little bit more frequently because you're doing very low intensity, and with low intensity, you're going to be able to recover a lot faster. Let's say your biomotor ability that you're trying to enhance is flexibility. Your mobility can be trained daily without any real negative side effects. Your joints, if you are going to be doing any type of joint mobilizations, ideally you want to work from the ground up. And with regard to stretching, you would want to go proximal to distal. Let's say you want to focus on agility and coordination. Well, agility and coordination drills, these can be done frequently at lower intensities. You could do things like agility ladders, cone drills, even something like dancing. Dancing would be terrific. If you want to work on your agility, start taking some dance classes. And lastly, let's say we want to work a little bit on coordination and balance. If you were doing things like proprioception exercises to enhance our coordination and balance, these are very, very low with regard to intensity. So because it's very, very low intensity, these are things that can be performed every single day and it's not going to be an issue. In fact, with my rehabilitation patients, we do our proprioception exercises every single day. But rest is up, time for set number 2. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high-quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.